Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 17 and compare it against the iPhone 14 Pro Max and see which particular iPhone is a better one for you. Now, the big thing I can definitely tell you is that these two types of phones are very, very good types of options. They're both very good, expensive type of devices when they first came out. However, the iPhone 17 is slightly cheaper than what the iPhone 14 Pro Max originally retailed for. So, if you want to go through and pick up either one of these particular devices, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these particular devices. The iPhone 14 Pro Max originally came out back in 2022. And the thing you have to remember with this type of device is that these types of phones and these types of devices are still very, very good phones. The iPhone 14 Pro Max on the front side is giving you a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. So this type of display and this type of panel is still very good for the most part. It still is going to feel like a very expensive type of device, and that is a very big advantage. Like, if you're going to be able to go through and pick up a phone like this, you're still going to be able to get a really good type of display. It gets fairly bright for the most part, not the most bright, but it gets good brightness for the most part. You're also going to be able to go through and still maintain all that, 120 hertz refresh rate. So that is another really big advantage there. So going through and grabbing that type of refresh rate is going to be another big advantage. And like I said before, I for one, if I'm going to go through and pick up a phone, that is a really big advantage there. Now, I will say it's not perfect. It doesn't get the brightest. There can be some issues with that kind of stuff. There's like a little bit more bezel on this type of device too, when compared to some other types of devices that you might end up looking at. But I will say for the most part, if you're in the market and you're looking for a phone, I do think something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max's display on the front side still looks pretty good for the most part. Now, for something like the iPhone 17, this one is going to be giving you a much better type of experience in some ways. This one's going to be a smaller 6.3-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. So the panel is smaller a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but it is slightly smaller in that particular situation. It's still giving you an always-on display, still giving you a dynamic island. Everything like that is still kind of the same, but you are going to be getting a little bit of a better type of layout there inside of something like an iPhone 17. There's way less bezel on the 17. I feel like the smaller display feels better in my hands, but also it's giving you a much brighter display as well. So being able to go through and get a brighter display on something like an iPhone 17, standard, it's actually a pretty good situation, and I feel like that is a nice thing going on for that type of phone. Now, on top of that, another kind of slight advantage here too is that with something like an iPhone 17, that phone is also going to be giving you a slightly limited type of experience. Not limited, it's going to be better when it comes down to the charging port. Having USB Type-C inside of your iPhone is amazing, and you're going to be getting that there inside of something like an iPhone 17. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is giving you a Lightning port. It was in fact the last iPhone to give you any sort of Lightning port from that situation. So that is also another one of those key takeaway areas, because if you're wanting the better device here, well, you're going to have to look at something like an iPhone, 17 is giving you the better charging port. They're both giving you frosted glass backs, which again is really nice to have. The iPhone 14 Pro Max, that triple camera setup, the iPhone 17, that standard dual camera setup. And I like both these phones. I think they both feel and look very, very good. But if I'm trying to get the one that's more of a flagship here, like I mentioned before, then definitely something like an iPhone, 14 Pro Max in some ways could feel like more of a flagship. But I look at something like an iPhone 17 as being that way more optimal, better phone in this particular situation. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to the price tags are slightly different when it kind of comes down to it. So this is also another one of those things to keep in mind here, because if you're trying to get the device that is going to be giving you a better experience from the situation as well, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is way cheaper than something like an iPhone 17. So if you're trying to get the device that is going to be better here, the iPhone 17 is going to be more expensive than something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max. And that right there is going to be another one of those key takeaway areas. Now, on top of that, another important thing to keep in mind here too is that with something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max, this type of device is going to be giving you that triple camera setup. So it's going to be giving you that wide ultra-wide telephoto lens. The iPhone 17 is missing out on that telephoto lens, and it's only giving you a wide and ultra-wide camera. Now, with that being said, I will still say with something like an iPhone 17, this camera is giving you a few more features inside of it than some of the competition would basically give you. So the iPhone 17 is giving you kind of higher megapixel count inside of that type of device than something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max on all the cameras. You're also going to be able to go through and get like a little bit slightly better type of features inside of the iPhone 17 as well. Now they both can give you 4K at 60 at, on the front and the back, which is nice. But the 17 is giving you 2x zoom, where the iPhone 14 Pro Max is giving you 3x zoom. So once again, that is an advantage there inside of that type of device, which is nice. However, I will say when you are going to go through and pick up a device, there is something really cool going on with something like an iPhone, 17, where it gives you that center stage capability on the front side, and it also gives you that it gives you the dual capture mode as well. So that right there, again, is another really nice thing to have inside of a device. So once again, if I'm picking up a device, it is really nice to be able to get that type of capability inside of it as well. Now, when it comes down to software longevity, this is another one of those key takeaway areas. So, if you're going to go through and pick up a device, I really do like and appreciate being able to go through and buy a phone like an iPhone, 17, that's going to be giving me like long-lasting software support. But I will say with something like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, this type of phone is still supported with software. So it's not like these phones are going to be outdated like today or tomorrow. These types of phones are still supported with software, and they're probably going to be supported with software for many years to come. But if you're trying to get the device that is going to last for a longer period of time, that definitely is going to be from something like an iPhone 17. So kind of keep that in mind when it kind of comes down to it as well. Now, on top of that, I think another really important aspect here too is basically when it comes down to their, performance chipsets. So the iPhone 14 Pro Max is giving you the Apple A18 chips, the iPhone 14 Pro Max giving you the A16 Bionic chip inside with 6GB of RAM, where the iPhone 17 is giving you the A19 chipset inside with basically 8GB of RAM. So from a performance perspective standpoint, a phone like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it still is going to feel, I would say, like a pretty decently fast phone. It's not going to feel like the fastest phone of all time, but that phone is still going to be giving you like a good type of experience. And I feel like that right there is one of those important aspects, right? Because if you're about to go through and pick up a device, it would still make a lot of sense to go through and buy a phone like an iPhone 14 Pro Max because it still feels pretty fast. But I would say the iPhone 17 is going to be the far better one here for the most part. That type of device is going to be the one that's going to feel like more of a flagship for probably a lot of people's standpoint. And I feel like that right there is another one of those key areas. So again, I think if you're going to go through and pick up these types of phones, that is just one of those things to keep in mind there. With that being said, the 17, although it's faster, the 14 Pro Max is still giving you a pretty decent time when it kind of comes down to it. So to kind of sum it up, what I definitely will tell you is that these types of devices, for the most part, they are still very, very good, interesting types of phones. I'm a big fan of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I thought it was a really good phone when it first came out. I just don't know if this is a phone I'd recommend anybody to buy anymore. Right? There are substantially better types of phones out there in the market, and I feel like it makes a lot more sense for people to go through and buy those phones, maybe like an iPhone 17 rather than something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max. But with that being said, I still think if you're in the market and you're trying to go through and buy a device, I don't really think you can go too wrong with something like an iPhone 14 Pro Max. But if you're in the market already, then I would probably just recommend going through and buying something like an iPhone 15 Pro or an iPhone 16 Pro. Like one of those types of devices might end up giving you an overall better type of experience. And I feel like that's what makes a lot more sense to go and buy, in my personal opinion. So if you're about to go through and pick up a device, I kind of feel like that one makes a little bit more sense to pick up. But I feel like the 14 Pro Max still is a really good device too. But if you're trying to get a better device, then probably just go for something like an iPhone, 17. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.